Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Facebook. Good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. Good afternoon, everyone who is tuned in. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you all so much for tuning in. For those who are, let me just test this to see if it's working. Yes, so Jenny Ali, I'm able to show that you said hi, Faith. Hi, Jenny. Um, Hi, Joanne and Nori. Nice seeing you. Thank you guys so much for joining the live. And hi, Joel Henry. Thank you so much for joining. And please keep sharing. Please keep sharing the live so that other people can um, be a part of it and to be a part of it in real time. Of course, if you share it and they are talking and so forth, otherwise, and I can't answer the questions or I cannot respond in real time. So if you share the live now and they join and now, then we could communicate in real time that way. All right. So the topic today is Tobago ready to be reopened? Is Tobago ready to be reopened? And I already see Darren Grant asking if I feel it's a good idea that are we ready to be reopened. And I am going to lay out just a couple of things that I think we need to do to ensure that we are ready. I mean, remember, I am not in the executive of the Tobago House of Assembly. I'm not in the TRHA. So there are some questions that I have. And if the answer to those questions are, acceptable, then certainly we'll be ready. Darren says, I don't feel it's a good idea just yet. Well, let's go through really quickly to see whether it's a good idea or not. We will see, we will see, we will see. Okay, so just quickly, if you recognize, just to give a little bit of context, if you recognize that for the last 2 or so weeks in Trinidad and Tobago, if you've been listening to the press conferences held at the Ministry of Health or led by the Ministry of Health, you would recognize that they have been doing more testing. And of course, if you've been following me, you will recognize that I have been screaming from the top of my lungs that we need to be doing more testing, more testing, more testing, more testing. I still don't believe that we are doing enough testing just yet, but we are doing more testing nationally. As a matter of fact, when you listen to the press conferences by the Minister of Health, you would recognize that they are doing the surveillance testing, which is where people who come to the health facilities with cold and flu-like symptoms, they are asked if they want to be part of this ramped up testing for surveillance testing. They are swabbed and their swabs are taken to be tested for SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19, coronavirus disease 2019. So that has been good. The results thus far of the 500 tests that they've done so far with that process, they said all of them have been negative, which is absolutely wonderful. All of them have been negative, which is amazing. That's wonderful. That's great. We are happy about that. My question specifically, though, is about Tobago, because I am not convinced that of that 400 or 500 tests that they have done, how many of those have actually come from Tobago? And that's one of the questions I want us to ask. And I'm hoping that members of the media would probably see this and also ask that question specifically. The Division of Health, Wellness and Family Development sent out a notice today saying that they are not going to have a press conference today because they've been having press conferences weekly on Friday afternoon, which I don't understand, but whatever. I personally believe that they should be having press conferences more frequently, one, to explain to Tobago what these things that are said nationally, what they mean for Tobago and how they are implemented in Tobago, how they will be implemented in Tobago. So even though we may not need to have a press conference every single day, I think having one every week is not enough. And we are at the point now where we didn't even have one this week. We're not going to have it this week. They said they're going to have it on Monday. Again, showing another reason why, again, I don't know if it's because of the whole hoopla with having no chief secretary, having a chief secretary elect by questionable processes, having no executive council as a result of having no chief secretary, and all of that, all of the madness that's going on there. I am not sure if that's the reason why we don't have a press conference today. But even if we did, even if they did, even if the secretary couldn't be there because there are no secretaries or whatever, the technocrats could have been here, could have been there. The people in charge of the hospital and the health centers, and those people, they could have been in charge. They could have been doing it. All right, so let's go back to the testing. And I see some of you are already picking it up. Yes, Winston. The last number I saw was 141 for Tobago. And I actually went back and I looked for I went through the Facebook, the division's Facebook page, because they usually post them there. And I also get, I think I'm on a list, a broadcast list by one of their professionals. So I get the thing. So I went and I actually looked, and I do recognize, if you see here, I'm not sure you can see it very well, that yes, the last press media release that was done on May the 4th. May the 4th, that was update number 14. And they did say as at May the 4th, the number of samples submitted to CARFA was 141. The number of samples that tested positive, 5. The number of deaths, 1, unfortunately. And the number of people discharged at that time was 3. So that is what that most recent release, which was since May the 4th, that is what that says. You would recognize, though, that we have ramped up, quote unquote, ramped up testing in Trinidad and Tobago before May the 4th. So if many of those 500 tests that came through the surveillance testing had come from Tobago, this 141 number, in my mind, should have been higher than that. It should have been higher than that if we were really doing the surveillance testing as I think we should have been doing in Tobago. The other thing we have to be conscious of as it relates to that number, is the fact that we have to again pay very, very careful attention to the words. It says samples submitted to CARFA. Samples submitted to CARFA. And remember, because members of the media have been asking very specific questions. And last Friday, when the question was asked, I think, in terms of the samples that were actually submitted to CARFA, how many were actually tested? How many were actually tested? That is not an answer that they could have given just yet. So it is possible that we submitted 141 and maybe only 120 of those were actually tested. We don't know, and we need that to be very, very clear. I think the last time I heard they had rejected probably up to 30 samples that we had sent. They had rejected up to about 30 samples. So again, we are not sure of the 141 exactly how many of those were actually tested versus how many of those were versus the samples that we are talking about. All right, so that is critical. That is critical. If you listened to my live on Monday, you will recognize that I highlighted Iceland as an important case, because in Iceland they have been showing us, they actually sampled in Iceland up to I think about 6% of their population, up to 6%. Iceland has 360,000 people or so is their population, and they sampled 6% of their population. Maybe I could take a little time to pull up the video that I presented on thing. Maybe not. I'm not sure if I'll have the time to do it. But even if we think back at that, 6% of the population is how much Iceland has tested. Trinidad and Tobago, let me pull it because I had it calculated somewhere before. If we test, and we have tested about 2,000 people in Trinidad and Tobago, total 2,000. So that included the 400 or 500 from the surveillance testing that we've been doing. We don't know what the figure is today because there was no press conference today. Out of 1.3 million people in Trinidad and Tobago, or totally, we have only tested 0.15% of our population. That's how much we've tested in Trinidad and Tobago total. In Tobago, if we look at the 141 number, it means we've only tested about, and again, that is if all 141 were tested, which we know that is not true. We have only tested 0.235%. So that's not even 1% of the population. It's not even 0.5% of the population. It's not even 0.25% of the population that we've tested just yet. And that is a cause for concern, because one of the criteria to determine whether we are ready to open up or not is by determining whether we currently have control of the virus on the ground. Do we have community spread? And if we have community spread, do we have control of that community spread? The only way to know whether we have community spread or not is to test a larger proportion of the community, whether they are asymptomatic, pre-symptomatic, or symptomatic. And then that would tell us whether we have community spread, yes or no, within Tobago. Now, in Trinidad, they may be able to, they are getting all of their negatives, or the 400 or 500, they're all negative. And I have a little inkling that not even 10 of those are from Tobago. So if that is the case, then we really, really, really need to be concerned here in Tobago about whether we are ready, because they may have data for Trinidad and Tobago that shows that Trinidad and Tobago is ready. But by Trinidad and Tobago, they really mean Trinidad is ready because of what they are experiencing and not necessarily what we are experiencing in Tobago. So let me just share again a couple of the comments that have been raised. Karen said 400 sounds really small for a population of 1.2, and the population is actually closer to 1.4. It's actually closer to 1.4. Michelle is saying Tobago people taking anything. Tobago people taking anything, which has been unfortunately, that has been our situation for quite some time, where we seem to take anything. We seem to not scream. We seem to not shout. We seem to not say, oh, we must do this. You also need to remember that a couple weeks ago, well, by now it's almost a month, they promised us a machine coming to Tobago for us to test samples here. They promised us a machine coming to Tobago for us to test samples here. Initially, it was supposed to be a large PCR machine where you need the full lab kind of thing. My understanding is that that machine is on hold for now, and what we're supposed to get is a smaller point of care PCR machine, meaning it's a smaller machine that kind of basically just fits on a table top, that you could have it in the health centers or anywhere and use it, and as long as the person knows what they're doing, they'll be able to get decent results. It's kind of like it's bigger than the machines that we use for blood sugar and cholesterol, but it's that same kind of concept where the machine is designed for people with less technical skills to use it. That's why it's a point of care machine. Yes, you need to know what to do. Yes, you need to know how to calibrate it and that kind of thing. But it is one that is basically on a desktop. It fits on a desktop so that you could take samples and do it immediately. I don't think that that machine has made it to Tobago yet. If I am wrong, this is one of those times. You know, when you don't mind being wrong, this is one of those times I do not mind being wrong. As a matter of fact, I will be elated if I am wrong in that circumstance. That because I would be jumping on top of my couch with my shoes on if I am wrong about that machine already being in Tobago. It needs to be Tobago. Um, so that is one of the things we have to look at. Remember what I have said from the beginning, and I would stand by this. And if we had done it from the beginning, we would not have been in this position now. I had said from the absolute beginning that Tobago had an opportunity to make our own decisions here and for us to do surveillance testing. And when I say surveillance testing in Tobago, I mean testing that includes surveillance testing that includes testing people who are asymptomatic, meaning they don't have signs and symptoms, so they could have the virus inside of them, it's multiplying inside of them, but for whatever reason, they are not showing the traditional signs and symptoms that we are looking for. But because they have the virus, they can spread it to other people. And my idea of surveillance testing was, in addition to the people who show the signs and symptoms, the people who are obviously sick, who are symptomatic, they're obviously sick. In addition to those people, we should be going out and randomly selecting 1 in every 100 people in Tobago and testing them. And if we had started that a month ago when we started talking about it, as a matter of fact, it's more than a month ago, because I actually said it in the last sitting we had in the Tobago House of Assembly where we debated anything, which was in March. I said it in March that we could have started doing that. And then I did the calculation because CARFA said that their testing, their huge expensive PCR testing, costs $250 per test. If we do 1 in every 100 people in Tobago, we have 60,000 people. That's 600 tests. That is, when you do the calculations, $1,050,000 in Trinidad and Tobago dollars to test 600 people in Tobago. To me, that would have given us a better understanding of what is happening on the island, and then we would have been way more comfortable to say, yes, we do not have community spread in Tobago, so we can go ahead and open back up our businesses. So yes, because we should have done that, because we did not do that, it is difficult for anybody to make an informed decision about whether we are ready in Tobago. If we had started that, if we had just spent the $1 million, then we would have been able to say, yes, we have no community spread. We have full control of what is happening on the island. And because of that, we are happy and we are confident. That's the word. We are confident that we can open up because we have the data that shows we can open up. I am not sure we are there. As a matter of fact, I know for a fact that we are not there, because if the May 4th report only speaks to 141 samples being submitted, then we are nowhere even close to having tested enough people in Tobago to make such an informed decision. Now, the other part about this that we need to be conscious of is when we open back, and yes, opening back is not necessarily everybody go back to work one time, open up the borders. No, we are not talking about that. We would have to do an initial allowing people to mill and go around within our borders. And then after we allow people to move around within our borders, see how that goes for a little bit to make sure we don't then have a resurgence. Then we can say, okay, let's open up our borders, because we know once we open our borders, we would get people coming in with the virus. So you need to do it where you first have a baseline. And that is what that 600 tests would have done. We would have had a baseline. We would have been able to say, since we've been testing, we started testing a month and a half ago, within the first month, within the first 2 weeks, we had all of these tests, we had all of these positives, blah, blah, blah. We are now getting to the point where we've been testing for the last a week, 2 weeks, and we're not getting any positives. If we do that, then we would have a baseline. We would know, okay, this is where we are right now. That would give us the data and the confidence to open back up. Let people go to work, let businesses open, of course, with precautions. That includes still social distancing, still wearing your masks outside, still, still not going back to the way it was originally, because we still have to make sure. And then we would continue testing during that phase. And then depending on what happens, if we see a big jump in cases right after we do that, then we know, hey, let's pull back and do something about that. But if we don't see a big jump after that, then we can say, okay, then let's maybe think about opening our borders to people in the Caribbean or people in thing. Because, for example, if you look at what's happening in New Zealand is beginning to open its borders, but only to certain countries very close where there's a very good working relationship. And they have been working together, even though they are different countries, working together. And so they know that if we open our borders to this one country or to that one country, then our two countries have this thing under wraps to some degree. So opening it up a little bit more is not going to be bad because these two places already have it under control. So it is that level of phased opening that we would have to do. And again, all of that is hinged on us knowing where we are right now. And the only way to know where we are right now is to open up testing some more in Tobago so that we can have the data. Until we have that data, Trinidad could do what they want. And, honestly, let me tell you something. That is my fear. My genuine fear is that Trinidad is using the data that they have. And because their data is showing that they are doing pretty decently, I am afraid that they're going to use that data only. And when they use that data, that is, they would make a decision for Trinidad and Tobago that is not going to be a wise decision for Tobago. That really, really, really honestly is my fear about this. And because Trinidad has taken advantage or has gotten to the point where they can open up and they can relax some of their restrictions, they are going to use that as what is needed to guide the entire country, while Tobago may not be there just yet. And that is my issue. That is my main concern about using the data that we have and having it really only be for Trinidad and not Tobago. That really is my horrible, horrible, horrible concern. That is my concern. So now the other thing we have to be conscious of, the other thing we have to be very, very conscious of is the fact that when we open, because these are the things we need to be careful of. When we open our borders, it has to be, we have to know that we will be ready to deal with the consequences of more people getting sick. Because the reality is the way COVID-19 is, and we've seen it in other countries, they're doing pretty good hunkering down, but as soon as they lift those restrictions a little bit, it starts to get back high again, because they did not find everybody who was already on the ground with it, and they did not isolate them, treat them, and ensure that they were better. So the reality is, when we open back the economy, when we open back the borders, we need to ensure that our healthcare facility can withstand the influx of new cases that we are going to have. We are going to have new cases, whether we like it or not. We are going to have new cases. It is what it is. We are going to have new cases. So we have to ensure in Trinidad and Tobago that we are prepared to treat with those new cases. And again, this is a perfect example of how Trinidad has been developing and Tobago is being left behind. We heard the Minister for Health last week, I think, or I can't remember when, speak about the fact that they were able to increase the number of beds in Trinidad by a couple hundreds within a matter of weeks. They have Cora, Cuva, they were able, so Cuva, they were able to use Cuva, they were able to, use the home of football, they were able to use Napa for different, they were able to do so many different things to increase the number of beds that are available, to increase the number of ventilators that they have to treat with patients and all of that. And we have to ask ourselves in Tobago, were we able to do that? How many additional beds do we have? How many additional ventilators do we have? We know that a couple, 4 or so ventilators were supposed to come to Tobago. Have they come? See, these are the questions that I was hoping the Division of Health, Wellness and Family Development and the TRHA, I was hoping they would have the press conference this evening to tell us, yes, we got the ventilators. Yes, we got the machines. Yes, we did this. Yes, we have thing. Remember, they were speaking about having the mobile, the temporary hospital, as you're seeing them using these temporary hospitals in New York, where they put up the tents, put the bed, and that kind of thing. 2 or so weeks ago, we were told that TEMA was responsible for sourcing that. These are the things we need to have updates on, because the reality is, once we open up, once we lift these restrictions, we are going to get more cases, and Tobago needs to be able to deal with the cases that we have. Tobago needs to be able to deal with the cases that we have. And yes, let me go to some of the comments and just highlight some of the comments that I've been seeing here. Yes, we Grant. Okay, so Darren is telling me that he is asthmatic and it has bad sinuses and it's very difficult to breathe with the mask. It's very difficult to breathe with the mask, particularly if you're using a cloth mask thing. But remember, really quickly, the cloth masks are to prevent you from infecting others. The cloth masks do not prevent you from getting infected because it's not made out of the right material. The cloth mask is there so that if you have it, and if you have the virus inside of you and it's multiplying, if you are speaking in public, that you do not accidentally or inadvertently spread the virus to others. That is what the cloth mask is there for. So that is why you only need to wear it when you are outside around other people who can't social distance or physical distance from you, just in case. It's really one of those just in case. Just in case you have it and you're about to sneeze and you didn't recognize the sneeze was coming, you already have a barrier over your face to catch the sneeze. That is what the cloth mask is for. So no, it is not there to protect you from other people, but it is really you protecting other people from you. And if all of us wear the cloth mask, as difficult as it may be, then we are protecting the entire community. Is a perfect example of public health versus medicine, public health versus individual health. Yes, I see Annalicia talking about, although my profession depends on tourism and the hospitality industry, I do hope they don't open the borders to international travelers, because yes, once you open up the borders to international travelers, then we're going to have an issue, because we're going to have people coming from Jamaica, people coming from Barbados, people coming from the US. Oh my God, people coming from the US. You realize how many people are dying in the US every day from this? The US has become the epicenter of this thing, and all of us have family members in the US who may want to come home and so forth. So yes, we all, but that is the thing. We need to be sure that when we open, whenever that is, that we are able to treat with the possibilities of all of these things happening. Um, Annalicia said that domestic tourism, that market may be quite sufficient for now. And the reality is that Tobago has been surviving on domestic tourism. We've been surviving on tourism from Trinidad, because we really haven't been having all of the tourists coming from Europe and the US and all of those things. Michelle said, I know two people who have the same issues. I assume you're talking about the issues of, are you talking about the issues of not being able to wear the mask, or what issues are you talking about? Um, Stephanie says the reality is going to be survival of the fittest, and when God is ready for the rest. Unfortunately, let me think with that. A couple weeks ago, Americans and a lot of people were really up in arms when I think it was Dr. Oz, one of those TV doctors, went on a television show and basically said that we have to be conscious of what percentage of death we are willing to live with. And there was a study that had spoken about a 1%, 2%, 3%, that kind of thing. And everyone was so upset with him when he said it. But the reality is, when we open up, unfortunately, people are going to get sick. Unfortunately, those who are most at risk are going to die. Unfortunately, that is just the way it is. What we really, really have to ask is, how much death are we comfortable with? Personally, I am not comfortable with any death. And I am certainly not comfortable with death to any of my family members. And I am sure each of you feel exactly the same way. You don't want your granny or your auntie or your uncle or whoever to die. I don't want that for my family. So that is kind of a balancing act. And that is why I think it was so important for Tobago to have done what we needed to do. Tobago should have done what we needed to do to ensure that we were in a better position to make an informed decision. We need to be in a better position. Shamike says Tobago, we can't open up everything just yet. We need to open part by part, leave the international borders closed. I think that is a consensus. I think almost everybody agrees with that. Karen says, oh, Karen, I'm so sorry. I need to come home. It is frustrating. And that is the thing. We have many Trinbagonians who got caught outside after the borders got closed. So there are people who genuinely want to come. There are people who want to come and need to come, and we need to figure it out. Michelle explained, yes, you were talking about the mask with asthma and how difficult it is. It is very difficult. It is very difficult, and that is something that is understandable. And you may have to look at getting other kinds of masks. There are those with the vents that allow you to think, oh, the reality is, until then, you may have to really make a decision to not go out, to not, because being asthmatic too, see, that is the other thing. If you are asthmatic or if you have other breathing issues, then you are also at increased risk of having really, really severe outcomes if you do get it. So it's one of those catch-22. You have to be 10 times more careful than everybody else. You have to be so much more careful than everybody else. Um, Darren said, I lost a person COVID-19, one here in Tobago and in the US, and many infected here. Yeah, sadly, that is the case. I met somebody recently who is in Tobago but lived in the US for many years, and the person said they have actually lost, it was close to 20 people that they personally knew who died. And when the person said that, I was like, oh my God, the thought of knowing that within a month, 2 months, you personally know 20 people, because the person was living in New York. You personally know 20 people who died. That to me is that is hard. That is really, really hard. And we have to then deal with the consequences of having that kind of loss, that kind of grief, and so forth. Now, again, I just wanted to reiterate, we need to do a little bit better in Tobago, and we need to take control of Tobago. And I am going to play again for you the footage that I played last on Monday, I think, about Iceland, and showing where Iceland is and why we need to use Iceland as a model. I still don't think it's too late. Yes, we are a month and a half later than we could have been, but it is still not too late, given that we probably are going to have COVID-19 around for quite some time. It's going to be quite some time until we get treatment or until we get a vaccine that actually works. And the reality is, in Trinidad and Tobago, people don't like, when you are a child and you get your childhood vaccines, that seems fine. Adults in Trinidad and Tobago don't like vaccines. So even if we get the COVID-19 vaccine, many people would still not take it anyway. So we are going to have to deal with it. So let me show you, I'll round out again. I'm replaying the video that I played on Friday about Iceland and how they have done a really decent job, with hopes that Tobago would emulate or would replicate what we do in Iceland, because it makes way more sense for us to do that. So let me just play that really quickly so that you get a sense of what Iceland did and why testing is so important and why having a comprehensive response is so important, right?
You'd have thought that an island nation hundreds of miles away from any landmass would have been a reassuringly safe place to be in recent weeks. But in that time, the mesmerizing beauty of the so-called land of fire and ice enticed in plenty of visitors. Icelanders themselves headed in and out for work and pleasure. In a world of mass travel, remoteness is no insurance against a virus spread by people. And yet this small nation hit back against the arrival of COVID with a strategy of test, 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 and unusually not just on the sick, but the seemingly healthy. Not a single person in this busy private clinic has shown the faintest sign of having the virus, but they've turned up anyway to be tested, for reassurance, to make sure they don't spread disease unwittingly, and to provide blood for research into antibodies to fight COVID.
I want to help, and I want to be safe. If I'm going to have an answer tomorrow and it's yes, so I have to stay home.
As part of our social responsibility, I feel responsible to come and just do the test to make sure that me and the people I live with, virus-free.
Iceland now believes it has tested a higher percentage of people than any other nation. More than 45,000 samples have been taken from a population of just 360,000. Over 40% of those who tested positive had no symptoms at the time and were quickly isolated. The country's Prime Minister admits being a small nation has its advantages, but they're keen to share what they've learned with the world.
In a small country, people really, it's easier to get information to everybody. I think we have shown a lot of solidarity also, and that's very Icelandic, maybe because we're a small nation on an island and we tend to argue about everything, but when we are really hit with something difficult, we tend to show very strong solidarity, and we've been doing that.
But testing is only part of Iceland's success story, which has seen the number of cases drop to a daily handful, on one day recently none at all. Huge effort has gone into tracking contacts of people confirmed to be infected.
Apparently you are in Iceland at the moment.
Detective Chief
Okay,
Inspector
so how long are you
Gesta
planning to stay?
Parmesan is part of a tracing team which at one point was 160 strong. A veteran of counter-terrorism and organised crime, he's using old-fashioned investigative skills to locate people who've been close to those who tested positive. A phone app which can trace where people have been is now helping in that effort.
The rule of thumb is if you've been within 2 meters for more than 15 minutes of an individual, you're believed to be a contact. So once we've gathered all your contacts, we call the contacts and tell them that they have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks.
Iceland's approach of test, track and isolate has allowed it to avoid some of the more draconian restrictions imposed by other nations. But the government has now decided anyone entering the country has to quarantine. Believing they've got on top of the virus, they don't want to risk travellers spreading it again. Michelle Clifford, Sky News, Reykjavik, Iceland.
So there we have it. We can, if we are looking for someone to emulate, if we are looking for a country to emulate, I think it should be Iceland. Iceland has 360,000 people. We have 60,000. We have 60,000. Now imagine if Iceland was able to do all of that with 360,000, if we had really taken control of this in Tobago and had really taken control of our 60,000, we would have been in a much better position. So really, are we ready to reopen? I don't think so. Having just sent over about 141 samples to Trinidad, and of those, we're not even sure how many of those have been actually tested. No, we are not ready. And I was really hoping, I'm really praying that those in charge in Tobago would stand up and would fight for Tobago, because we really, our size makes this so much easier to deal with. Our size makes it easier to deal with. If we need the money, let's fight for the money. If we need the equipment, let's fight for the equipment. But we need to be able to make informed decisions. And I'm asking each of you to help me push so that these questions are answered, so that these points are raised, so that we don't have to deal with the negative effects of COVID-19 when we open up work again, or open back our borders again, and then we are not ready. We are not ready when it relates to testing. We are not ready as it relates to contact tracing those who test positive. And I don't think right now in Tobago, we are ready to treat our health. Our health system is not ready to respond if we have a surge. So guys, I really thank you all for tuning in. Really thank you for listening. Share the live, and hopefully when the Division of Health, Wellness and Family Development does their press conference on Monday, we can get more information about what is really happening on the island, and we would know that if and when we decide to open up, it is because we really are ready to lift the restrictions, and we are ready to deal with the consequences of those lifted restrictions. Again, have a great day, have a great weekend, be safe, stay home, stay safe, keep social isolating, keep social distancing, wash your hands, and we need to do this. We need to do it right, and we need to stand up to ensure that it is done right. All right, my dear. Thank you all. Have a blessed day.